raised him for 17 years, and I just don't want anything to do with him anymore. So you got him, you keep him, click.
Teens in turmoil, forced to fend for themselves on the mean streets. They've run away from abusive or neglectful families, but are the streets any better?
Ideally, any good regulatory system will strike a balance between consumer and stockholder interests.
Ever wonder why your phone bill keeps going up or why your power bill seems to be skyrocketing? Peter Bradford may have the answer. If your dog gets the best of you, Kathy DiMartino can help. She turns canine terrors into obedient, complacent pets. These stories and more in 30 seconds.
Hold our world in your hands with 12 insightful and entertaining issues of Capital magazine. Available by subscription or on your local newsstand. Politics, science, business, and the arts, all in Capital magazine.
Additional funding provided by Salisbury Chevrolet. Chevrolet makes the car. Salisbury makes the difference. Salisbury Chevrolet, Route 50 in Scotia, at the Schenectady County Airport.
On today's cover story, troubled adolescents in upstate New York, running from difficult, often abusive homes. They're ending up on the streets with prostitutes and criminals for company. Is there any hope for these throwaway teens?
There were times I had to scrub for food, you know, to beg for something.
Then suicide came to mind. I was down at sea.
I could be anywhere. I mean, who knows, you know?
You think you know their story. You don't. Runaways, often thought of as kids running toward a dream. They are instead often running from a nightmare. Tammy, Jennifer, Denise, all runaways. All talk to us. We thought you might want to listen.
In Queens, like, we're constantly, like, I'd say about 2 to 3 years, I was getting raped on and off. And then my sister approached me and told me that the same guy was bothering her. And the guy was like a close friend of the family. And when my mother found out, she took us to the police station in Orford. We took care of all that. She went to Queens to talk to him and came back, and her stepfather called us liars. And
Denise's problems boiled over when her family moved to Albany from Queens. She agreed to talk if we agreed to hide her identity.
When I was 2 years old, my mother started using drugs. And she started, like, hanging out in the street and prostituting.
Tammy was 11 the first time she ran away. When she went to the police and told them her stepfather beat her, it signaled the end of any hope for a normal home life.
So I went and I told the cops that I really wanted to stay away from my mother for one night. And when they found out who my mother was and the things that she's been into, they took me away from her and put me in my first group home.
What followed were years of being passed from one home to another. In the middle of all the turmoil, she got pregnant. A year ago, at 18, she gave birth to Tayana.
When I got pregnant, I was like, oh my God. I didn't know what to do. I said, oh no, I'm following my mother's footsteps. But then I started going to church and stuff, and it was like, I'd go to church sometimes. Then I got hooked back up with Equinox.
Hi, Tammy. How you doing? Hi, Tiana. It's good to see you.
The Equinox Youth Shelter in downtown Albany gives runaways a place to stay while they wait for a new foster home or other accommodations. Not surprisingly, none of the kids currently in the shelter wanted to talk to us.
Whoops, a couple of threes up there.
I got mine there first.
Finding yourself out in the streets isn't always the result of a traumatic experience.
It was the emotional things with us. It was never the material things, never the material. I mean, we had everything we wanted all the time, anything. That's what she was giving us, you know. And I think that's where our problems are. Till this day, I think that's where they are. She doesn't know how to give of herself, like here.
Jennifer was 15 when communications broke down with her mother. Her first step was her father's house, then to friends. Finally, she ended up in foster care. Donna McIntosh, the executive director of the youth shelter, says the stories of Jennifer, Tammy, and Denise are typical.
If you look at it sort of like how this country treats pets, you go out and you get a little kitten or a little puppy, and you coo over them. They're so cute, they're so lovable. Somebody has a baby, you know, Tammy's little baby, oh, so cute, so adorable. We all love the baby. What happens to the adult pet? Off to the shelter. They're no longer cute. What happens to the adult child, the teenage child? They're no longer cute either, and it's easy to get rid of them.
I've cried a lot. I mean, there are times right now, I'm still a big girl, and I still cry for my mother, but she's not there. She's not there, you know? I cry for her all the time to hope that she changes. I pray to God that she changes, but it won't happen.
But problems don't go away when you leave home. Tammy says her mother is still out prostituting on the streets of Schenectady, dying of AIDS. After Denise left home, she got pregnant and miscarried. She's missed so much of her senior year that now she's worried about graduating.
I'm trying to work with the teachers, and I don't think it really matters to them what you've been through. Just as long as you do their work and get out. You know, that's all that matters to them.
The answer for Denise, if she passes this year, is the Army. It's her ticket out of Albany, where all the hurt and pain have happened.
Are you running away to the Army?
I guess you could say that. Yeah, it's any way to get out. If I had the money, I would pick up and go away to college or somewhere. But I don't have the money. But if that's my way out, that's the way I'm gonna take.
Donna McIntosh points out the shelter is not a hotel for transient teens. The staff helps the kids make decisions and calls their parents to let them know their children are okay. But often, the answer on the other end of the line is,
I've raised him for 17 years, and I just don't want anything to do with him anymore. So you got him, you keep him, click. If you're not in an arena where your life touches a lot of young people, you're not going to know about it. But it's happening. Kids prostitute in Washington Park all summer long. They're prostituting in the Schenectady area as well.
It's an unseen epidemic, even here in Albany. The youth shelter services about 200 kids a year and turns another 200 away because there just isn't enough room. But there is always room on the street. Since we aired this story last year, Tammy Anderson and her boyfriend, Orlando Perez, have had another child. Also, the Division for Youth's request for state appropriations was slashed by $1 million. Up next, getting your dog in line. But first, let's take a look at viewer response to last week's show. You're watching a television program that is produced in and around the Capital District, and you now have a special opportunity to pick up the telephone and let us know your opinion of what you're seeing.
Saw your segment on Kyle, and I think it's just simply fantastic that he is giving it his all, and I think that other children with special needs should do the same and become independent as he is. Thank you.
I'm happy in Glens Falls. We're lucky enough to have an open and very receptive administration who have attended lectures and conferences, and they're now planning to visit a totally integrated district in both Vermont and Syracuse. I am confident, my husband is confident, that we'll be working out a very satisfactory program for our daughter. Besides, it's the law.
I would agree 100% with your premise that it is by far more beneficial to educate disabled children through the process of mainstreaming, which is covered under Public Law 94-142.
If you like what you see or have thoughts about the program, pick up the phone and dial 1-800-OTTV now. Adorable. That's how most people would describe puppies. But if you've ever owned one, you know they're only cute until they destroy the new rug and chew up the furniture. Well, Kathy DiMartino may be able to help you get that pup into shape.
Sit. Sit. Tobacco. Sit.
Just another night of dog obedience training at the Pet Exchange in Latham. Students are getting reacquainted. Owners are bracing themselves for another intense etiquette session. Explaining the do's and don'ts of canine courtesy is the canine equivalent of Amy Vanderbilt, Kathy DiMartino.
I want you heeling around the room. You can stop and walk forward and make right and left turns. That's all I want you to do. You use your own...
Kathy's been training dogs since she was 13. Of course, life's gotten a bit busier since then, a full-time job, plus being a single parent. But she still manages to find the time to get in the middle of all of this confusion several nights a week.
This is my relaxation for work. I do sales all day, and this is how I unwind and relax. This is great.
Tanya, down.
Down.
Go down.
Sit, Tanya. Down.
No.
And tell them down.
Down. Down.
Stay.
You're not down. Down.
Tell them stay and get right out of
Stay.
there. That's it.
This has got to be one of the ultimate human challenges, instructing owners of rambunctious dogs and how they can communicate with Fido. According to Kathy, repetition is the key.
I don't think people realize the dog is not born with our vocabulary, and we have to teach the dog what we're asking at first and what the words mean. And once you do that, then the training goes along fairly well.
The Pet Exchange was established in 1982 by Joe Marotta as an alternative to animal shelters. It was at this time he also decided to offer obedience training.
People would come in and they would say, oh, I've got to get rid of this dog. It's jumping up on the kids and knocking the kids over and it's pulling me on the leash. And it's such a simple thing to correct. With a dog obedience class, you can bring it down for a quick 8-week session, and that dog is the best behaved block after those 8 weeks.
Although each dog is unique, the problems they develop as they pass through puppyhood are very similar.
She was chewing on things and sneakers and gloves and stuff. She'd steal them and chew them up.
And just running around the house being a terror.
So in addition to learning commands like sit, stay, and heel, which enable a walk to be more than a battle between man and beast, Kathy offers advice sure to stop destructive habits. The only sure way to see results is to be dedicated during the 8-week-long session, with training exercises practiced at least twice daily, you hope.
Let's everybody down their dogs.
You sit there, you say, okay, let's sit, stay, we'll practice. And she'll sit for a second and say, no, not tonight. I can't be bothered doing this. And it's like, come on, I'm putting a little effort into this. And then there are nights where you can't be bothered, and the dog's sitting there going, well, I'm ready. Why aren't you? You know, it's a little give and take back and forth with that.
Right after Sabaka, and Max too, give him a good yank. Don't let him get away with it. You take somebody like Max's owner. That shepherd, if he was not trained, would be such a handful after a while that they wouldn't want to have the dog. So he'd wind up getting placed in one home to another, until it got to the point where nobody wanted the dog. I look at it this way. If I can help a couple of people to have their dogs trained, and they're happy with their dogs, and they're going to keep the dogs, and these dogs aren't going to be turned out in the street or turned over to the pound, I feel I've done more of a service than anything else.
The trainer's reputation is well-deserved. The producer of this segment, Marci Elliott, brought her own canine terror to Kathy. The result? Her furniture is still intact. Up next, I'm one-on-one with Peter Bradford, right after this. If you have a phone or use power in your residence, you've probably noticed your bills are skyrocketing. Peter Bradford talks about whether his Public Service Commission is really working in the best interests of New York State's consumers.
But we like to think that all of our decisions are made with the consumer's interest in the forefront. And in fact, we have gotten as much criticism in recent years from groups and individuals purporting to speak for stockholders Niagara Mohawk, for example, at the moment is not paying dividends as a result of their difficulties in completing the 9-mile .2 unit. Most of the other utilities in New York have cut their dividends. Lilco eliminated its dividend on Long Island for a number of years, and Con Ed, of course, passed its dividend back in the mid-1970s. So the stockholders of utilities, not only in New York but across the country, have taken quite a beating themselves in the last decade and a half. Ideally, any good regulatory system will strike a balance between the consumer and stockholder interests in such a way that the utility that does the best job of providing for its customers will also do best for its stockholders. That's the way the private enterprise system is supposed to work. The problem is that with the nuclear construction programs, the interests of the stockholders and the interests of the customers got out of line, and that's a big part of the reason why the electric business was so controversial for about 15 years and why so many companies got into so much trouble.
If someone handed you $2 million and said, build your own dream house, what kind of heat would you put in it?
Well, the first thing I'd do would be to take advantage of every possible efficiency. That is, design it in such a way to get the full advantage of whatever exposure to the sun one could get, put in all the maximum sensible levels of insulation in the ceilings and the walls, get energy efficient appliances. And I think if you do all those things, you can get by with astonishingly little energy from whatever source, whether you would then use gas heat or electric heat, oil heat. I don't really have an offhand preference among those sources. I guess I'd go with the price and supply that seem to me to be most dependable and favorable. But with that kind of an emphasis on energy conservation, which is easy to do in a new house if you set out to do it and take advantage of the new technologies, the fuel source that you use won't matter very much because the operating cost will be such a small part of your budget that you can make the decision you're comfortable with and be secure in the knowledge that even the wrong decision isn't going to cost you very much.
Recently, New York Telephone requested a $965 million rate increase. If approved, you could see your monthly bill go up by 35%. Now, let's take a look at the happenings calendar. Up on next week's edition of OTTV, upstate New Yorkers like Sharon Strack are trapped. In a softening real estate market, it's getting harder and harder to find buyers. People are finding themselves trapped between two homes. Is it a case of seller beware? Join us again right here, same time, same place, next week for OTTV, the Journal of Our Time.
Hold our world in your hands with 12 insightful and entertaining issues of Capital Magazine, available by subscription or on your local newsstand. Politics, science, business, and the arts, all in Capital Magazine.
Additional funding provided by Salisbury Chevrolet. Chevrolet makes the car. Salisbury makes the difference. Salisbury Chevrolet, Route 50 in Scotia at the Schenectady County Airport.